Welcome back to Geeks and Grounds, a monthly game club where we play games together and brew good conversation. My name is Jenny.
I'm Joel.
And we're here with an interview talking about Bugsnax.
Bugsnax!
So excited. We have had the joy and pleasure of getting to talk to Kevin Zuhn from Young Horses, the creative director and the writer of Bugsnax. So if really there's anyone to talk to about the themes, the characters, the story, they would be the one.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know if you have any details you'd like to add, maybe any caveats that folks may want to know before we hop in.
Yeah, so this game's a little bit older than some of our previous games that we've played through, so we get to some light to heavy spoiler territory about midway through. We'll give some warnings in the actual podcast itself. But it's a really rich conversation. Would strongly recommend you listen, even if you're trying to avoid spoilers. There's nothing that's gonna ruin the game by any means. So yeah, I would say give it a try, even if you're midway through the game. I think you'll have a good time.
Just sample it. Little taste of the snack.
You know, a little taste.
That can hurt. That couldn't hurt. What could hurt about a snack? Eating a snack right now.
Or your relationship to the snack. Hopefully you got something tasty to sip on as you're listening today. Hopefully you got a good snack as you've been playing along.
And if you'd like to follow us or join the club, if you haven't joined in, go to geeksandgrounds.com for all the info and all the social links. We're basically Geeks and Grounds everywhere, but geeksandgrounds.com is the main hub.
May your Geeks and Grounds be everywhere? No, that was a bad one. We'll do better next week. Sorry.
All right. Well, here's the interview with Kevin, and thank you all for listening.
Cheers.
Cheers. All right, thank you so much for joining us, Kevin. We're really excited to talk about Bugsnax. I cannot say that sentence without just a little smile because it's just it's in my head. It's been in my head for the last, I would say, a couple of years because you all had a song that just went absolutely viral. Basically, everyone was singing it, and we've brought it back for the 1-year Steam launch anniversary to play it this month. And yeah, we're excited to talk with you about it. But before we dive into the game itself, we wanted to know a bit of how you would describe Bugsnax in your own words.
Since I'm the writer on the project, I've spent a lot of time describing Bugsnax in my words. But basic summary would be Bugsnax is a first-person adventure game where you explore a mysterious island filled with Bugsnax, which are half bug and half snack. You study, lure, and trap the Bugsnax, and then feed them to a group of hungry outcasts in order to transform them into food and rebuild their scattered community.
Hungry Outcasts. I love that description.
That's my new band name.
One of the things we struggled with when we were trying to create pitches is if we use too many proper nouns, we have to explain what each of them are. If we have to start explaining what a Grumpus is in the pitch, we're in trouble.
Oh man, yeah, that is so good. It kind of sparks a whole line of thinking and questions for me around the outcasty nature of each of these people, which I had not even thought about as I was playing the game. So, oh man, very fun.
Yeah, where do we even start? I think one of my favorite elements is being able to go into the world, and it's so silly and so fun. We see foods that we recognize, that we love and enjoy. And so just to kick us off, I'm really curious what your favorite bug snack is as you were making this game, if you had a personal preference towards any one.
Oh, absolutely. It's hard not to, right? That's the advantage of there being about 100 of them. My personal favorite is Praying Picantis. Because I love mantises, in real life. I think they're the coolest bug. So any mantis-themed bug or Pokemon is my favorite by default. Second favorite goes to Scoopy Banoopy for having the best name of all the Bugsnax.
100%.
Was there any... Because what's really fun for me is trying to figure out how the names of each snack came to be. And so I'm really curious, because it seems like there's an eclectic mix of this is maybe more of a pun, this is just really fun to say, but I'm curious what the rhyme and if there was a rhyme and reason, or what methods you use to name all of these snacks.
I think you've caught on to the process, which is we try as hard as we can to make a pun that like fits the food and the snack together, or the food and the bug together. And if we fail, we say something really funny and let that be it.
Was this like y'all are like gathered in like some sort of conference room and someone's brought donuts and it's 3 hours later you have one new name, or is it like we're rapid firing? Like what does that look like?
It's us in the conference room. We've got a big spreadsheet of like, all right, this is the one we have to come up with a name with, and everybody yells names and we write them down no matter how bad they are until we can figure out one that we think might work. And those meetings would go for hours because, again, we got a lot of bugs to name.
Yeah, so many. I was really impressed because I think when I went into Bugsnax, I didn't really know what to expect. I had seen the trailer. I had heard the theme song. I was like, this is going to be bright and happy. But there are so many different tools and mechanics that you fit in. I'm really curious, what was it like to make Bugsnax, especially following up Octodad, which was your first title, because they have a very common thread of just being really funny and silly and tongue-in-cheek, and with a lot of heart, but mechanically, I think there's a lot of difference that happened. Really curious about that.
Sure, yeah. Because like the biggest mechanical difference is moving into first person instead of third person, and that it's an extremely different like design pattern. Like physics was always going to be a part of it, I think, because the engine had already been used to build Octodad.
Yeah.
So all it can do is jointing systems, right? so that's what we made use of. And like, you know, trying to adapt the behavioral AI from like people walking around in a grocery store to bugs, right? Like we used the systems that we had and we tried to refine them. But like from the beginning, we were trying to make something that wasn't Octodad or even close to Octodad.
Yeah.
Like we have a drive to like really try different things. Not that we didn't talk about whether to do a sequel to Octodad. We did, but like, I think we're more excited by the idea of exploring something really weird.
Yeah, the way that you're able to engage the player through Bugsnax with these like additional, they're almost like like each bug snack has its own like puzzle mechanic associated with it. I don't know what you guys call that within your world, but that to me was such an engaging way to play. At first, I was like, oh, I'm just gonna walk around. I'm gonna like catch the bunger, and that's going to be the game, is like catching bunger type things. And then it's like, oh no, like almost every one of these has some like extra puzzly mechanic that you get to like play with. I think the pop, what were they called? The
pop tick?
Soda pop.
Yes.
The pop ticks with
the pop ticks where they turn to popcorn.
That was fun.
That was the one that like really like, I was like, oh, there's a whole other layer to this that I have not yet like really experienced, and just like took it to another level for me.
A lot of credit for this goes to John Murphy, who's my co-designer on the game, who like really digs into systemic gameplay. Like he really loves to build the game in a way that we don't care how you succeed at catching the bug snack. All that matters is that you got it. And like, I know he just gave a talk recently about all the things that inspired him, and he really got he got a lot of ideas from playing Breath of the Wild and from playing Horizon on like allowing the player to experiment and stumble around when it came to trying to solve the problem of how to catch something. And like the tools especially, we were trying to make it so that they all had these kind of broad uses that could apply in a lot of situations.
Yeah.
I think you really captured that. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was going to say, it was so much fun to experiment. And I think there were instances where like things would happen and I would catch like 2 Bugsnax on accident completely, but it made me feel so very good because it felt much more like a true adventure. Like I really was this journalist put into the weird position of having to catch food for this community.
It's funny because your comment about like there's no wrong way to catch them, it's one of those like gratifying things where it's like I felt like I was getting away with something. The first time I launched my trap into the air off of a spring and like captured something that was flying around, I now realize that was in the trailer, but in the moment, because I played it before I saw the trailer, I was like, oh, I'm gonna get away with something here. I'm gonna work around. They didn't see this one coming. There's some joy there.
In a lot of cases, you're going to be right. Like, there are tons and tons of methods for catching that we don't anticipate. And I've seen, like, I've watched YouTube playthroughs of the entire game where people do just wild stuff with the traps that I wouldn't have even occurred to me.
Anyone in particular stand out as, like, a memorable one?
Yeah, they're, like, if you've ever used the trip shot, with the launch pad, you can put the shot on the pad and then fire it when it's already attached to something, which means that you'll send the shot and the line like sailing through the air, and anything that touches the line while it's flying like gets stunned. It's a high level move.
I'm like, I need to go in and try.
I want to go back and
it's very cool.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of places where it's practical to do that, right? Where there are easier methods than that to catch something, but it's extremely cool.
Yeah. Oh, I absolutely love that. Were there any, because it did feel like, with each area that we explored, we got a whole different tool. And so it was really fun having to reframe, again, like each puzzle. Was there anything that didn't make the cut where you were like, nope, this is a bit too much, or maybe this is a system that doesn't add to that level of discovery that we're hoping people to have?
So much was cut for
really?
that exact reason. Yeah, we went really wide with the amount of traps that there were first, and then scaled them back based on kind of what was redundant. Because there are a couple of things we did. Like we had these balloons you could attach to traps that would send them floating up into the air.
Oh, cool.
We had a giant fan blow things around. We had what was that thing? Net cannon, just actually shoots entire nets out of it. And the net cannon was too powerful, right? If you hit a bug, you caught it. That's too much. Like the balloon was redundant with the launch pad. Like you had one thing that made traps go up, and that was enough. And like similarly, we thought of having like different versions of the basic trap. Like we created the flap trap, which could fly, and the scrap trap, which was made of metal and was immune to fire.
That would have been nice. The fire.
It could have been nice. But the funny thing about that is, like we don't actually want you to get around fire that easily.
Right.
Like it's such a big hazard, and you need to plan around the presence of fire or ice that kind of solving that problem for you wouldn't be interesting. And similarly, we had a lot of times thought about or implemented giving you the ability to shoot fire at something, right? Like you've got your sauce like slingshot, but you could have had a fire slingshot. But at the end of the day, if you had the ability to do that, to set anything on fire that you wanted, you wouldn't need to look around the environment for sources of fire, and you wouldn't need to take advantage of other Bugsnax that are on fire.
I will never forget the amount of pure joy that I felt after getting burned over and over again when I was standing in a river when one of the Bugsnax was launching fireballs at me. And it was just like this big like F you to the Bugsnax. It's like, you can't get me now. And then it's like, it keeps rocking you and hitting you backwards. So like there's still like that little bit of like challenge and like impact because of it, but I wasn't catching on fire and running around. It was like, oh yeah, I got you. Like, I don't know, it just really made me happy.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
figuring out Oh, go ahead.
Can't be on fire if you're wet. That's the rules.
That's the rules.
Exactly. Well, and it's so cool because it wasn't simply about like me as a player figuring out how to catch a snack. It was, okay, I also know, the bunger likes to bump into things. Like, how can I incentivize these interactions to happen? And that's what really made the world so much fun. And I think even as a player, even if I knew an easier way to do it, sometimes my brain would say, oh, but what if I tried this? Like, would this work? Would it not? And more often than not, it would work. And so it's really cool just to not only feel like I'm catching the Bugsnax, but I'm getting to know them on an interesting level.
Yeah.
That was definitely a big goal of ours, just to make sure that there was something about each Bugsnax that made approaching them slightly different. So that you never, I mean, we didn't always succeed at this because sometimes we just had to color it different and say it was a new Bugsnax. But but mostly that was our goal.
Yeah, I was thinking through other games that are more open world that I really wanted specific NPCs to interact. I'm thinking Skyrim or Breath of the Wild, where it's I am taunting a giant to follow me for an hour so that it will interact with this dragon over here, or a Hinox and a walker or whatever. And being able to have the slingshot to actually get these Bugsnax to go after them. It's I love that they kind of gave us a way to make this happen, to make these Bugsnax interact without having to make them follow me for an hour to get to this other part of the map that's forever away.
We've spent a lot of time talking about the mechanics of Bugsnax and sort of the technical act of playing it, but especially since you were the writer for the game, I really want to dive into the themes, because for Geeks and Grounds, that's what for me attracted me to the game, was this tagline of "you are what you eat." And on the surface, that is, we hear that all the time. It's, we look at a food pyramid. It's all right, you're eating a Bugsnax and you turn into, part of you turns into the Bugsnax. But I felt as we kept playing, and this is maybe a good shout for anyone who hasn't finished the game, we're going to start talking spoilers. It's more about the narrative. So that's the heads up. As you continue playing, the game becomes less about the literal act of eating, and I felt like it was a bit more about, this idea of consumption as a whole. And I wanted to talk to you about just what was it like to create this? What were your intentions when you were developing the themes of this story?
I think that early on, when we were developing the story of Bugsnax, we were thinking about what Bugsnax mean to the characters who are encountering them. Because we had decided fairly early on that they were not a good thing. And the specifics of what that meant wasn't always clear, and it took some exploring. Because we did think about in terms of what if they're more literally junk food, or what if this is sort of an environmental message. But it really wound up being more about the characters' specific inner demons, right? The problems that they refuse to face in their lives, and the idea that Bugsnax are this distraction they're all using, and that likewise the Bugsnax are using them. And so, thematically, we leaned into this idea of them as a deeply unhealthy coping mechanism. And I think that just kind of goes hand in hand with deciding to get very character focused with the narrative, to really understand what all these people are there for. That sort of guided where we were going with all of it.
The cast of characters is pretty big. I feel like, and you have a stellar voice cast as well, and each of them has such a distinct personality, and like you said, they each bring something very specific in terms of what they are running from, what they'd like to run toward. I'm curious, what was it like to create this cast, and just how did you go about getting this group of Grumpuses together on this island?
That it was a very interesting process, sort of defining each of the characters, because at the beginning we just sort of had one word that described what they did in this little society, because that's all we had at the start. It is a group that lives together, and so I think we were trying to cover in a sort of I mean, we're heavily inspired by Lost, so it's like Lost, right? Where everybody's coming from different places, um, and to kind of serve the idea that they each understand Bugsnax in a different way, they kind of have their own personality, their own perspective that defines this. But at the beginning, it really was like there's a farmer in this village, right? There's someone here who is sort of like a spiritual leader. There's someone here who is like a socialite. That's as archetypical as we started everything. But from there, asking the questions. So this character, this archetype, what is their relationship to Bugsnax? What is it that they want that they are not getting? And kind of what is going to lead them astray? And answering those questions, we just sort of dig deeper and deeper past that point and get into more and more specifics because after that, we started asking, how do they feel about each other? And so much of these characters wound up being defined by who they didn't agree with and who they did in their sort of personal perspective. And it was interesting because like as far as relationships go, those were not predetermined. Who would like who would be a couple, who would be enemies. We defined all the characters and then after the fact said this person would not like this person. And then wrote the story around that. If that makes sense.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I feel like you what it allows us to do as like the journalist character who's coming in is it'd almost be comparable to the audience coming in and starting with like season 2 of Lost, where it's like all of these characters have established relationships, they have identities before the island, and they have things that have happened to them since this like community kind of split apart, and all of them inform who they are as characters and their relationships to one another. And it's so interesting. I had not made that. Our last 2 games that we've played, we have Lost has come up as a story point of reference.
We need to do a group watch at this
3
point.
for 3 now. But what's fascinating about this is because we get to come in as this journalist in this like almost second season-esque element or aspect of these characters, it forces us, it really changes the shape of the mystery. Like, you know, if we were part of the crew that crash landed into Bugsnax Island or landed on Bugsnax Island, the driving mystery for me would have been around who were these people before the island. And I think because we're coming in almost into like season 2 thing, the drive is way more, how are these characters connected to one another and what caused the split within the community and what's it going to take to bring them back together. And that's like, oh man, what a compelling way to get people just to drop directly into your narrative.
It's interesting you say that because I remember like as I was going through the story, I had just sort of decided not to ever really talk about the before. Because it doesn't matter very practically to what is going on now. Characters will talk in vagaries about like why they like what they used to do and why they're here, but like no one's got time to really explain their whole life.
Yeah, and it also keeps the pace going, like in a really comfortable way for the player.
I think it's like giving them all time to develop relationships before you get there, I think partially was done to make it more interesting. Because if they didn't know each other, if they were all strangers, you're right, that like increases the kind of mystery of who they are. But I feel like it doesn't give us as much to work with when it comes to their ensemble, like how they do function as a group, as a community. And so to me, it was important to understand all of that, like for myself when I'm writing all of this stuff.
I'm going to make a quick, more heavily spoilery comment here. So plug your ears for 30 seconds if you don't want to think about this. In one of the later community parties that we're having, when you have to like go to different coupled characters and like you bring one a drink and that helps them feel more comfortable coming to the dance or whatever. I think that was one of the moments where I started understanding almost like the gravitas, like what are the relationships that I am most engaged in and most interested in? Like that scene was where like all of that was kind of put to the test within my own mind. I'm kind of curious about any particular like relationships, be they antagonistic or romantic or otherwise, that you felt particularly attached to.
Yeah. I mean, I would say I'm attached to all of them just by virtue of I had to spend a lot of time thinking about each of them. But as far as like, if I were going to talk about which ones are my favorite to do, Beffica and Cromdo's like rivalry is extremely fun to write because they're both, I don't know, they're both so mean and so like the two of them really hate how similar they actually are to each other. Because I don't know, like their relationship to like the nature of truth and like the fact that they're both extremely cynical about people, but in opposite directions, kind of. It's just, that's fun to go through. The other answer is Snorpy and Chandler, but that's like to me an obvious answer. Those two are they're adorable, right? Like,
yeah.
I lost Storfley at the end game, and it was like the saddest moment. No, I mean, like thankfully you built in the opportunity to go back and like redo that without it being too painful, because it was like I wasn't expecting to lose anyone, and when that happened, I was just like shattered. I was heartbroken when you get to the scene on the beach and he's not there. So yeah, I went back and did it again and felt a lot better afterwards.
One thing that I find really interesting, one character I found really interesting was Gramble. Because unlike everyone else on the island, Gramble is the one Grumpus who is able to kind of resist the siren call of Bugsnax and not eat them. And in addition to Gramble having just like a lot of really interesting, I think, we don't learn too many details about Gramble's backstory, but there's enough detail to know that there's something that happened there. And I'm really curious how Gramble came about, and why was it important to have a character who maybe wasn't answering to the call of Bugsnax and, you know, wanting to just befriend them and take care of them.
To me, it's like important to like when I was talking about how everybody has a different perspective and a different relationship to them. Given that Bugsnax are animals, or at least appear to be, whatever they may really be, like I felt like somebody who really cares for them as living creatures, like I would be remiss if that wasn't in the story. Especially, I'm a vegetarian myself, and so like I personally don't like eating animals very much. And so a character who has a similar perspective, I don't know, only came naturally to me. Though Gramble at the same time, though he's not eating them, he's still consuming them, right? Like he's still reframing his life around Bugsnax in an unhealthy way. It just doesn't involve putting them in his mouth.
Yeah. It's interesting because you mentioned like it's not necessarily a healthy relationship, and it's like, well, you've come into this new environment and you've decided that it's your job to put these beings in a little pen that's yours, and like that is its own kind of like almost domination. So yeah, that's really fascinating. It's like everyone has like that element that's unhealthy in relationship to the Bugsnax.
His like. He's got a powerful ability to project his emotions onto the Bugsnax, right? Like he spends all his time assuming that they have human emotions, which is a big assumption. Because they are, like, you know, bugs.
Yes, absolutely.
One character that we don't really get to see, we get sporadic, I guess, video recordings, diary entries, and little bits and pieces, is Lizbert. I found her really compelling because we don't get to interview her or talk to her in the way that we do with the other villagers, but through the eyes of the other villagers and the Grumpuses, I feel like we were still really close to her. What was it like to create a character that people don't really meet, I guess.
Yeah. That one is extremely tough, because the question of who is Lizbert and why do we care about Lizbert is something that needs to get answered, for that to be kind of the central pillar of the story. And so that meant that there's like a huge amount of pressure on every scene that she is in to communicate as much as possible. Like, some of the characters have a lot more time to spool out who they really are. But Lizbert has to be she's a big character, right? Like, she's larger than life. She is pretty candid with her feelings. And she kind of has to be, because again, you need to know as much as possible. And like, the video diaries are really important, because other than that, your only chance to meet her is after kind of her transformation, right? Mm-hmm. Spoiler territory for sure. Where also her like mood has shifted in a really dark direction. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of the same thing with Eggabell. You meet her at a time that has gone very badly for her, and so it was important that you see some of the before. We had briefly discussed at one point giving you the ability to flash back to the past at times, but it just didn't work out.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know, so much of the game was locked in your first-person perspective and in real time that anytime we thought about breaking from that, it would be weird if we weren't doing it all the time, right? And so I do feel a regret there that you don't really get to see more of Lizbert. I guess I would say, like, at the peak of their society, right? Like, when she was developing her relationship to all of the other characters, when they came to admire her as much as they do. And we've talked in the past, like, is it possible, could we have a chapter that takes place where you play as Lizbert in the past? But I think that similarly, like, the information you get out of other characters is important for helping to develop her, but there's a big caveat there, because everything you hear from the other characters is distorted through their perspective as well. Mm-hmm. And is not necessarily the truth, right?
Right.
Yeah, the video diaries were one of my favorite parts, and now that I know about the Lost Connection, just kind of add to my Dharma Initiative feelings there.
Oh yeah.
I love that element, and that was as Jenny and I were kind of chatting through and thinking about the questions, and this Lizbert question specifically. I was so interested. I was like, man, I would love to get like the AO3 fanfic on Lizbert's life, or like the Man on the Island 15-minute like post story video of Lizbert's. Like, it's just such a fascinating character, and it's every one of the Grumpuses kind of gets their own little mini character arc, and we see how like the hurt of the community breaking up informed that character arc, and some of them grow in a really positive way as they build that community back up. And Lizbert and Eggabell, to an extent, you can see how the hurt really took them to a dark place, but because they don't hang out with the community that you've been helping to rebuild, you don't see them really get to the other side of that arc until their big moment. And I just feel like there's such a richness to that story that, man, sign me up. If you guys ever interested in doing more storytelling, I would be a reader, follower, anything you wanted.
Thank you.
Speaking of the community, one of the things that we were talking about is how that's a central theme of the game, how the community comes together, they fall apart, they come back together again. So what were you considering as a part of each of these characters going through their personal struggles, and how the community's kind of fracturing and rebuilding, how does that play into those character stories?
Community fracturing is a boiling point for everyone, right? Because you have to start the story at the lowest point for everyone. And so, like, when they're at their most isolated and they're most upset, and because that's I guess I would call it, like, that's what's a satisfying arc for the player as a character, is trying to rebuild this thing. And so, like, when you meet each character, they are kind of like at their worst. They're most cynical, they're most mad. Because, like, you meet Wambus and the first thing he does is, like, yell at Filbo and tell him to leave.
Yeah.
Which, like, later in the game, he would never do that.
Mm.
Like, he's not that rude on principle.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
But in this circumstance, right, like, everybody's pissed off. And so, like, it definitely heightens the amount that the characters are in conflict with each other. Like, everybody is more willing to get into a fight and, like, show the ugliest parts of their community at the start of the game. And I know that, like, some players have reacted badly to that. They're like, why does everyone hate each other? Why are they spending so much time, like, upset and yelling? And the reason is because eventually it won't be that way, right? Eventually it will improve. We have to see Wampus and Gramble really tear into each other for it to mean anything when they, like, kind of make amends.
Mm. I also wonder how many of those people have ever been on, like, a bad group project in school and just, like, maybe forgot what that was like.
I was going to say Twitter, honestly.
Fair.
Yeah, well, and for me, when I play this game, and, I think Bugsnax can sort of represent a lot of different things in sort of nuanced ways, but especially, like, right now, I think I think a lot about social media because it's part of my job, and just the way that people use social media to try and communicate, try and build community, try to find these positive things. I remember back in the day when the internet was going to solve everything, but then the more we consume it, the more it kind of does feel like it's causing us to fight or to disassociate or to, really hide into things that aren't actually helping us as people.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like in the fictional story of Bugsnax, right, these characters are trapped in this island. And so when they're mad at each other, they tried to break up and leave each other, and it didn't work because they're on the same island, right, at the end of the day. And there are, like, larger things at stake that they need to come together to solve because they have no other option. And I feel like in real life, it's not the same. We really can just leave and, like, let the community be destroyed.
Mm. That's so interesting. And then when you, like, pair that with, like, the truly existential threats to us as people, like, are global. And so those are the things that are the most pressing in some ways, are the things that we can't escape from and individualize our way out of, and it will require some sort of community coming together to resolve. So, man, what an interesting juxtaposition. You guys, you really nailed that. It's also funny you mentioned we meet them at their lowest point, and literally Filbo is, like, laying down.
Like, yeah, poor Filbo.
The funny thing about that, right? So, like, when we were first doing that tutorial level, Filbo was, like, standing up and okay. And our playtesters would say, why do I have to help this guy? He seems fine. Like, he could just get his own strawberry. And so I'm like, all right, I'll make him more pathetic. It's to the point where you're like, okay, he really needs my help, right? Like, it's without doubt that I have to be the one to do this.
It's for the drama.
That's right.
I have a question about deep lore that if you
please.
don't want to talk about, that's totally fine. But I was fascinated anytime we got to learn about, like, the people or Grumpuses that came before. And I'm wondering if there's anything about that you can share. Like, you hear hints about it throughout the game, but is there anything about that was kind of an interesting point of, like, the storied lore of this island that maybe doesn't always get to come through in the game, but that you think was worth sharing?
I mean, like, if anything, you might need to be more specific, because one of the things about the people that came before is that there are many eras of people who came before. That if you're looking, there's, like, expeditions before yours. There are, like, treasure hunts. There are whole civilizations that used to exist, and you find evidence of all of these different things. To kind of tell the story of the cyclical nature of this island, the people who come there who get destroyed by it. And if there's a secret area in the game that if you did either of you dig into the DLC much at all?
Oh, I didn't know there was a DLC.
I have not started it yet.
Okay. I mean, the DLC's like, it's a free update to the game, so it's already in there. Like, you don't need to do anything special. But there's like a separate island you go visit. And that has a lot more lore stuff in it. But also, there is a key that you can find that will take you to another place that has even more secrets. So the answer is, yeah, there's a ton in there. But I think like the stuff that is the most relevant is the stuff about the previous expedition, because that is the one that Triffany's grandmother was on.
Oh, so this is so fascinating. So first of all, you have inspired me to start digging deeply, because that was one of the things I was most curious about, and I didn't know about any of this, so I'm gonna have to go back through.
There's a lot. I spent a lot of time thinking about this, but yeah, like there's a lot that you can learn about what came before, but also only so much, right? Yeah. Like only as much as is necessary to like kind of deepen your understanding of the mysteries of this place.
Yeah, this makes a lot of sense. I feel like every time we talk through a game, I have some major misconception that gets fixed during one of these conversations and interviews. And one of mine was that there had only been one group prior to this, and it was like Triffany's, grandparents or whatever. And I did not realize how far back the like visitation to this island had gone. I just totally did not.
Well, think about like who built all those ruins like in the desert. That wasn't Triffany's grandma.
For those of you that are listening along and not watching the video, you can just see Joel face palming as he recognizes all the things he'd missed out on.
But that's fine though. Like, it's background information because it's not actually relevant to like the current plot.
True, but you're talking to the person that spent hours and hours on Lostopedia back in the day trying to understand every bit of lore about every group that had ever been to the island, and now I'm hearing that there's a new island with lore that I can dig into. I'm pumped.
So what I'm asking for Joel now is Bugsnax 2 when?
Oh, so funny.
We'll see.
Yeah. What I'm really curious, we're coming close to the close of our time together, and I'm really curious, what do you hope people come away with when they play the game? I think there's some, there's the silliness that, is definitely there, the fun, there's the deeper themes, the stuff that's super thought-provoking. What do you hope people remember, 5 years after they've played it for the first or second or third time?
That's a tough one, because I feel like... I don't know that I had like an intention for that in the ways that we create games and or write stories, we're just following it where it goes, and uncovering the themes ourselves as we're like writing and creating it. And if anything, like, it's hard for me to know what you should take away from it. But I know that as far as the way I think about it, I try to think about the way that I approach problems in my life and identify those things that are self-destructive, that are like causing problems between me and my friends, me and my family, and like identifying where I think a solution is a false one, right?
Yeah. Wow. That's
really
a
good
big
advice. One. That's a really good thought.
We talk about this last month. We focused a lot around like kind of the hurt people cycle. That was a big part of the game that we were playing. And I think this month, that idea of like habits and rituals that maybe served you at one point that are not helping you anymore. That feels like that's a really meaningful way for us to approach things like this, instead of it just being like, consumption equals bad. It's like, well, no, it's more about your relationship to these things that needs to be, you need to be curious about. Wow.
Awesome. Really, this has been so wonderful. We really appreciate you taking the time. If folks are interested in following Young Horses or your work, where can they find you?
I think it's at Young Horses Games on Twitter. I know we've got at Bugsnax for sure. I'm personally at Kevin Zuhn, though I don't use it a whole lot. Yeah, that covers it.
Awesome. I guess, and just because I'm sure folks probably would be sad if we didn't ask, any plans for the studio in terms of Bugsnax or any future projects? Are you all working on something? Are you able to speak to any of that? The fans want to know.
Unfortunately, I can't speak to that at this time.
Understandable.
I mean, we're always up to something, right? Like, we haven't just been sitting around, but I'm sorry. I wish I could talk more.
No, I totally understand. So folks should follow you and follow Young Horses and Bugsnax to stay on top of any updates as they become available. And yeah, thank you so much for chatting with us.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for having me. This has been good.
Absolute pleasure. And, you know, diving deep on these kinds of things can be really fun and also like stir up a lot of interesting emotions for those of us listening along. If you found yourself stirred, let us know what you think. We're happy to dive in with you. Kevin, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Thanks everyone for joining us today as we got to talk with Kevin about Bugsnax. Really excited to really excited to get to play with you and hear how the game experience has been for you. So hop into the comments, join the Discord, just go to geeksandgrounds.com, find all the ways to connect with us. Love to hear from you and hear your thoughts on the interview. Anything else for you today, Jenny?
I think that's it. Yeah, just follow us, find us. We'd love to hear all about what you think as you're playing the game.
Absolutely. See you next time.
Cool. Bye.